Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Banking and Business Dialogue. I'm KK, your host for the day. COVID-19 pandemic could be the most serious challenge in near century for our financial institutions. Practically, nothing has been established with a calamity in mind. The branches, the tellers, internal operations, products and services, forms, reports, you name it. None were designed for a pandemic. The bank branches were never designed to support social distancing guidelines. Okay, losses are in billions, but COVID-19 is causing far more than just financial damage. Leaderships are scrambling to secure businesses, keep fearful employees motivated to work, and replotting approved strategies. So all those strategies which were in place before COVID-19, everyone is looking at what do I do in the post-COVID-19 scenario. So this is an unnerving test of corporate leadership. Of that, there is no doubt. So we are in for a major change, and that has to happen. It's a tall order. In this edition of BBD, that is Business Banking Dialogue, we will discuss with Mr. Mrutyunjay Mahapatra about leadership qualities, most important aspect in today's times. We'll talk about leading change in banking in an age of uncertainty. That's the theme of today's discussion. Mr. Mahapatra, as you know, is an author, public speaker, digital leader, senior banker, till recently CEO of a large PSU bank, and is credited with all-round transformation of the bank. Member of Insurance Advisory of India, in the past headed global strategy, transactions and transformation programs of SBI, and its head of strategy and chief digital officer. He was also the CIO of the bank and has been a leader in many transformations initiatives in SBI. Besides a proven and capable leader, not many people know that he is a violin player for Hindustani classical. Sir, good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Always good to be back here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, do you get to practice violin now a little bit more than before?
Yeah. Everything has a positive side, and practicing violin, which was a little taking the back seat. Many times you discover many things, including your childhood, when you are past 60.
Okay, very well said, sir. Thank you so much, sir. So one of the major questions the pandemic has raised is, what do leaders need to do to bring the organization through a crisis like this? So what are your thoughts, especially with banks who have been delivering commoditized products and services for almost decades? So what are your thoughts in the change in the leadership that has to be seen?
See, leadership, in my view, is about managing risks and managing uncertainty. And leaders are required things take care of themselves, or managers are there to manage any kind of deviations from the SOP and bring it back on track. So leaders are essentially required to be strategists. And what is strategy? Strategy, the basic definition of strategy, as all of you know, is that uncertainty is the pivot of strategy. Unless there is uncertainty, strategy will never get made. Strategy will become process. Strategy will become routine. Strategy will become the set of instructions that is given to a front line to translate into action whatever are the budgets. So strategy requires uncertainty. So I think leaders must understand that the role of leaders as strategists will come into fore in times like this. Second thing to understand is that more and more what we will see is the individualization of the enterprise by the leaders. Because one thing is sure, all of us are in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. So you have, a different kind of ecosystem. The same ecosystem applies to different banks or different NBFCs or different financial institutions completely differently from the others. So what we will see is that depending on whatever boat you are in, what is the haulage you have, what is the ration that you have on board, what is the quality of your crew, what is the angle of the engineering to manage the sales of the SIC, will define going forward that what exactly are the ways in which we need to do this. And so leading to that extent will become more exciting. It will become very, very interesting, because leaders will be required not just to discover whatever inherent strength or past experience that they had. Those will always be of help, but they may not be of total help, because leadership in banking industry is generally oriented towards looking at the past. Whether there are any use cases, whether somebody else is doing it in the market, and accordingly you align yourself and you come back with a set of actions which are to be followed by your team. But in this situation, many times what will happen is that people will have no past records to go by. They will have to discover things as they traverse the road. So that will be the new difference in this new ecosystem that is unfolding.
Right, sir. Thank you. I like that words you said. We are all in the same storm, but we are on the same boat. And that defines how difficult it's going to be for leaders who will be, while sailing the entire organization through, they are in a different boat. And so it will demand a lot of them to display those qualities to steer through the organization. So thank you, sir. So the current humanitarian and economic crisis is like maybe once in a lifetime crisis. It has created an uncertainty shock. So CXOs, board of directors, consultants have to think differently in the new normal for steering through their banks through the storm. Like you said, they are in a different boat. What are the qualities that will help leader take charge of the rapid and uncertain change that is coming?
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question. In fact, a few days back, I was reading one of the signature productions or the signature publications that is brought out by any bank in the world. This is by BBVA. Those of you who are familiar with it, is a famous European Spanish bank, and its executive chairman is Francisco Gonzalez. I met this gentleman twice, and once in Madrid itself, and once when I was in Syndicate Bank, I met him in London also. So he brings out a publication once in a year, which is this publication, in fact, I was reading. This is called The Age of Perplexity. So rethinking the world we knew. So what he does, this is 2019, but what he does is that he commissions the best thinkers of the world to write this yearbook for the bank, and he took a liking for me, and he keeps on mailing this annual publication. In this, towards page 60 or something, there is an article by a professor of London School of Economics, which says that, in the new age, the technological overdevelopment must be balanced with sociological underdevelopment. Very prophetic words. What is happening is that technology is, pacing itself, because many times it is independent of the ecosystem. It depends on a few people, their own ideas. Today the banking sector has been, to say it in a very mild manner, has a lot of execution leadership, but it is lacking in thought leadership. So as execution leadership takes focus, planning for black swan events like this, like the current ones, always comes to the fore only when something hits your solar plexus. So what we need to do in the current, what differentiate leaders or what will require good leadership in this situation is to bring back on the table the thought leadership. Because if we look at the evolution of civilization, civilization has evolved faster in those nations where there were powers of ideas. So we will have to go towards that futuristic thought process. We will also have to bring into focus the continuous method of development, which many times is called Kaizen or whatever in global best practice. So continuous development rather than big mega projects coming in and defining, that will probably another test of leadership to adjust itself. Third important thing is that the millennial mindset on which we are priding ourselves in India, that we have the demographic dividend, banks will be more impacted through that, because what we are seeing in the new age is that there is a wage premium and wage discount which is playing out in the marketplace. Some of the areas, like whether it is at the basic level, whether it is call centers, customer grievance redressal, customer satisfaction, or in the advanced area, AI, ML, or data analytics, these will be under wage premium. Employment generation or marketing collection, these are likely to be more productivity and software driven. So as a result, what will happen is that these will have a wage discount. And because we have a skewed kind of distribution of urbanization, many times politically people tell that you have to make more and more urbanization. But this urbanization or financial inclusion will take a little bit of time. So what will happen is that people have to be brought to the jobs which will be created in cities as well as in the urban centers. And the banking system has to adjust towards this, that people will be absorbed in their entrepreneurial capacity in places where they didn't have any roots. So how do we support this new ecosystem will again define the banking leaders.
Right, sir. So since you touched upon AI and other things, so would banks and leaders continue with their pre-COVID transformation agenda driven by disruptive technologies like you said, AI, machine learning, perhaps IoT and blockchain, or look at a new paradigm now?
There will be a shift in the glasses through which they'll look at it. And in fact, as they say, in banking, like the society, there will be stress on what is globally known as the STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and management, in its own way. So this stress on science, technology, engineering, management will remain. But what we are looking at, if those of you who have read the book, it's a very interesting book. Again, I recommend to all your readers. It is called Bank 4.0 by Brett King. This book, I was looking at some of the thoughts in that, and it says that by the year 2022, about in the whole average of customers visiting a brick and mortar branch will come down from the current level of around 3.5 times a year to 1 time a year. This is the prediction. Maybe it will happen in 2022 or it will happen in 2023, but definitely the pandemic has accelerated the pace that people are getting more used to doing digital banking. Now, another prediction that he's making, and which is borne out by the financial saturation, Government of India brought out this theme called saturation of KCC card, and most of it was done through digital modes in finding whoever were the uncovered people, and what we are also seeing in terms of contact tracing, that he's predicting that 3 billion unbanked people, mostly in the developing and underdeveloped markets, will be put to the banking system only through the power of mobile. He has given this, as I told, this is not a place for me to discuss his views, but I am quite impressed, but because I am seeing those kind of things which are coming in. So if that is to be done, there are two things. As I told you, technological overdevelopment has to be balanced with sociological underdevelopment. Now, how do we do this? Because AI, ML, in case of Amazon, if we take it, Amazon is able to provide buying power to people who are coming to its platform, and is through its recommendation engine is able to sell better. These are the advantages. But what is the downside? Because the boutique stores, because the product innovators are unable to compete, so innovation is getting killed. So new product, new development, new research, as I told, STEM related, whether it is science, technology, engineering, or management, if there is a preponderance of engineering and management, that is preponderance of process refinement and managing profits, then science and technology, which are the pure play intellectual game, which advances society, will get a little backward. So my prediction is that for the next 2 or 3 years, the lens through which leaders will look at new technologies like AI and ML will shift towards productivity orientation rather than research per se, or bringing together new ideas into the POC stage will probably take a back seat. But some of the ideas like application of AI, I think they are too advanced to be stopped. Machine learning is too advanced to be stopped. Only progress is likely to be a little towards more productivity and delivering of the use cases.
Right, sir. So excellent, sir. Thank you for telling that. What the more the focus will be on productivity orientation, and I think those Bank 4.0, some of the things that you talked about is coming true, and that in future we'll see perhaps customers visiting on an average of 1 a year because of digital banking, and we are able to see that that's already happening. So, ladies and gentlemen, we continue to discuss with Mahapatra on the leadership styles that are required in the post-COVID era. Please put in your questions as early as possible to avoid a last minute rush. But please keep your questions limited to the topic that we are discussing, because now Mr. Mahapatra can talk on a wide range of topics. So please don't put every question there. Maybe some other time we could ask those questions. Try and keep your questions brief, to the point, and on the leadership qualities, while I continue my discussion with Mr. Mahapatra. So you talked about AI, ML, we did talk about and those kind of things, and that it will take a little backseat unless they are already in advanced stage. So the question that would come is in the area of PPTG, people, process, tech, and governance. I think these are generally been the mantra of many of the strategies that go into many of the corporates. How do banks and its leaders manage changes in these? Now, in each of these, how do we manage these kind of changes here?
I think this is a question which will be the core of all the leadership, because one cannot be isolated and taken forward. Although some, like technology, will always, and I have always told that people, process, technology, governance are the four legs. And if one leg is unstable, as one leg is weak, as Nathaniel Goldratt told in his book on critical chain, or the project, that the strength of the chain is that of the weakest link. So I think every one of these have to be addressed. But let me focus on a few things. First thing is that there will be massive demand for reskilling, de-skilling, and upskilling. So de-skilling, many times we believe that it will, through like we treat older employees, that they will go away through natural process of attrition, either because of age or retirement. Many times we treat the same way the skill also. We think that old skills people will forget. But many times making them forget the old skills or the old method of doing it is equally important as as reskilling or upskilling. So this will be one challenge before the banking leadership in particular, what we have seen, not just in computerization, because what has happened is that concurrent with the pandemic coming in, regulators, especially RBI, are on the overdrive. Recently, we have got one discussion paper in the public domain, which says that you have to corporatize, or the corporate governance of the banks have to improve. In this, they're telling that the risk function, the compliance function, the reporting or the vigilance function, these have to be separated from the management. Now, this has been, again, I thought that it is very instructive for me to point your viewers to a set of literature which I refer to. One website which gives very leading and cutting edge information is called Project Syndicate. It gets a lot of columnists, and I recommend everyone to look at it. And the other one that I continuously refer is World Economic Forum's papers. And both these point to one thing. In fact, if some of you can get hold of this book, this is called Fourth Industrial Revolution by Klaus Schwab. He's one of the directors in World Economic Forum. This is a World Economic Forum publication. And here in somewhere around page number 53, it articulates the challenges of business. The new challenges of business that we are looking at are that, customer expectations will keep on shifting. Products are being impacted by data, and that will continue to be there. The operating models will get replaced by digital models, where many times the operating models will be required to compete with digital models, where the processes will become more efficient. Many times may not be as hands-on, but that will be there. So going forward, what I believe is that people, process, technology, governance, the core elements will remain the same, but the blend and the recipes will continue to change. And the leaders, as I told you, because they are in a different boat in the same storm, has to use these four and make a recipe which is appropriate towards their organization.
Okay. Some sort of a customized recipe depending on their organization culture, I guess, is what is the. So then what will be our focus, sir? Will it be technology leadership or people leadership? What will be the focus?
As of now, it looks to me, without sounding too much politically incorrect, I think it will be technology leadership. Mm-hmm. Because today, as I told you, people, process, technology, and governance both are so interconnected that by taking care of one thing, you are taking care of many other things. As by not taking care of one thing, you are ignoring also the other things. I think at this moment in time, because people are getting used to offsite working, people are getting used to newer methods of connecting the value chain or supply chain, I think today I'll put technology leadership higher than people leadership. Because people leadership, it has become a matter of habit. If something is ingrained in you, you can ignore it only superficially. Because so I believe it has come to a stage of an autopilot. There is too much of brouhaha on people orientation, social orientation, welfare orientation, etc. I think they will take care of themselves, these people concerns, which will always remain because we are human beings. But if we look at leadership's focus or what leadership we want, probably enterprises and banking in particular will require technology leadership more than people leadership.
Point, sir. I agree with you. But although this is could be a little bit of a debatable thing, people from the people side will look at it as, after all, what is technology? Technology is all about people. And if you are not able to manage people, then the technology leadership will be questioned. Could
no,
be a thought.
Only one thing is that
yes,
it may sound a little provoking, but we must look at it that yes, if we take care, if we take care of technology, obviously we'll deliver it through people.
Yes.
But obsession with people processes rather than technology processes has to be deprioritized. That is the entire thing I want.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting a lot of information, okay, on the kind of qualities that have to be demonstrated by various corporates, and this has to be done because you are thrown into an era where you better rediscover yourself. So, leadership is being questioned, and it's all about leaders who will take the organizations forward. So, while I continue to have discussions with Mr. Mahapatra, like I said, please put in your questions. We have passed the half hour since we started the session. And so please put in your questions because I fear you're putting questions late in the show. I'm not able to get it across to the guest to answer those queries. So salute, let's do that. So one of the, we have always been having black swans, okay? The 2008-09 could be perhaps the last black swan before this COVID has come in. So black swan events have made the banking, kind of susceptible. So, the bank leaders realize that they should see the role as orchestrating, not commanding. Okay. So the question, this is that leaders have now to be orchestrating a team of people and not really commanding. From your experience, since you have led so many projects and people, how the leadership styles are evolving in the current crisis?
Is an excellent topic today, because we are looking at as two things are happening sociologically. The millennial workforce, love to demolish hierarchies, and the inherent quality of the leader, which is at a premium, rather than the position that he or she occupies in the organization. So this is one thing that is constantly getting reinforced. Second is demystification of work. Because the cloud technology has proven itself, and the cloud technology is able to cater to a larger, that is, scaling up capability of a cloud is very, very high. So it is likely that the components of the work, that is, every work which we may call a process or a product, is likely to be broken down to its components. It is repackaged and it is redelivered. So what I am, for example, in a bank today, if you look at the loan processing, there is a loan application, there is a loan appraisal, there is a loan documentation, there is a loan disbursement, there is a loan collection, there is a loan attrition or whatever. Let us say there are 5 or 6 or 8 steps. Now, if these are to be again put into its own components, because cloud capability or the digital capability or the post-pandemic redefinition of the expectations of the customers to be present or not to be present, to be present through somebody else, intermediary or not, that is coming to the fore in a big, big way. So repackaging of the work after breaking it into its components will be there for the leaders to pick up and kind of take it into their work. Second thing is that even Prime Minister Modi has told about it. There is an excessive cost of formalization in our country. Most of the things which cannot be done as was done during the first term of the current Prime Minister, self-attestation of, for example, your birth certificate or whatever. When I was in Mumbai, I was working with a few bureaucrats, progressive thinking bureaucrats of Maharashtra government. Let us say an income certificate or a land holding certificate is consumed in many offices. So why the applicant or the consumer of a service has to go to each office and submit these documents? It can be put on the cloud or it can be put on the blockchain, and every other department can consume it seamlessly.
Yeah.
So these repackaging opportunities, lower cost of formalization in banking or everywhere else, and supporting of everywhere in entrepreneurship. This is a term, everywhere entrepreneurship, has been brought out by Mr. Chandrasekharan, who is the current chairman of TCS, in his book Digital Nation. Those of you who have not read, his book, you can read Digital Nation. This is a very interesting, parallelly running story of an Indian girl coming of age and the Indian things that are happening. So the leadership has to look at demystification of work repackaging of work, increasing productivity, but at the same time, looking at balancing the people, process, technology, and governance.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting a lot of information. I'll summarize it a little later towards the end of the show. But please pay attention to this. Some of the books that Mr. Mahapatra has been talking about are extremely good books. The Digital Nation, the Bank 4.0, the website that he had talked about, website Project Syndicate, and the World Economic Forum speakers. So these are some of the books and references that you must learn, you must read to understand more about qualities and how the world is moving towards. So one of the questions that I want to ask you also is on the focus on leadership, focus on risk management. So most banks have fairly large risk management team, right? However, one big risk is the BCP, and the current crisis has said that the focus has shifted to BCP, which is generally considered a technology responsibility and a kind of a scheduled drill to be done, and a kind of a tick box that, okay, I have done this drill on so and so date, and maybe perhaps submit it to the RBI saying that we have done this drill. So should risk management leadership take a different look at this, focus more on sudden or maybe instant BCPs in future seriously to survive such crisis?
I think you, in your last question, you referred to black swan events. I think Nissim Taleb popularized that word with his book. But black swan events need not be a complete black swan, because the moment it is a gray swan also, people are not prepared. People are only prepared with maybe a white swan walking with one leg, or white swan is unable to fly. So they don't have, as I have seen many times, the same thing presented in different way, or managing around the edges is what the leadership is used to. You rightly brought into focus that the preparedness today in the system, in the banking system, for complete black swan events. The black swan event is not just regarding the pandemic. If you look at the Nirav Modi kind of an bank depends on trust. So bank has maker, checker, and something like that. But probably a black swan event is that where the maker, the checker, the authenticator, all three of them are compromised.
Yes.
So probably such situations which defy the traditional banking logic. When we were young, first time we used to travel through the airline. If you also remember, self-identification of luggage. That luggage used to be put in trolleys of Air India, and you go and you say, "This is my bag," and one of the porters used to tick it that this baggage has been identified, and otherwise it used to be announced. So the basic concept behind it is that if you are a traveler, you will not kill yourself. But that was completely disrupted with suicide bombers, coming into picture. So there are many suicide bomber-like situations which are black swan events which will come into foray, which are not just self-perpetuating, but they will come and they will manifest themselves. And once you are prepared, they may not reappear for 50 years.
Yes.
So how do we constantly probably deploy AI and ML for risk management to find out this? And is that improve productivity by analyzing the false positives, deploy algorithms likely positive list to the user. In risk management today, the false negatives are completely ignored. So going forward, I think again it's very important that risk management has to be everybody's business. The other day, I was attending a board meeting, and we were talking about the loss given default and the probability of default. Now, if a default has already occurred, then the probability of default is equal to 1. So in that case, LGD is the only number which depends on the bank's equity loss. So how do we take this thing, which is increasingly becoming mathematics and quantitative oriented? How do we translate the basic job into digital? The senior management's ability to interpret and take action or strategize for uncertainty will define the banks which will survive, and otherwise the banks will perish.
Right, so very well said, sir. Thank you. So we, like I said earlier, we get questions from the participants, and we also have couple of queries can come directly to you from the participants. So Harish Prabhu has raised his hand. He would want to ask you a query directly to you. So Harish, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Sure. Yeah, firstly, Mr. Mahapatra, a privilege to to hear you. It's always very, very invigorating to listen to your views. Secondly, I mean, my question is from a practical standpoint that given the legacy cost structure of the banks, and I'm talking of both private and public sector banks, being of the 80s and the revenue dynamics of the 2020s, right? And they're so essentially completely misaligned. And today, robust technology is already available to ensure that a remote banking services across all functions can be provided at a much, much lower cost. Hence, the logical inference is that you don't require that many people. So obviously, when so many people are not required to ensure that you are a profitable and whatever, how will you manage the transition of this so-called VRS, which we had seen in the early 90s? Where I'd noticed that a lot of bankers, had got VRS, in the whole system. And there was a small social, problem also over a period of time. And this time it can be much more, as you said, from now to the next 3, 4, 5 years, right? So the bankers might be, their banking as a career will not be the most sought after or whatever.
I told always, if you have heard my earlier speeches in various forums, it is an accepted fact that banking will be required and banks may not be required. So, how do we, 20 years back, Ron Chernow, he wrote a famous book called Death of a Banker. Now, there is very little that we can do to stop the influx of the para-banking entities, whether the retail stores or the telecom companies or the peer-to-peer players doing a little bit of banking will always be there, and it is also to be permitted because otherwise innovation will get thwarted. So de-skilling and reskilling, which I initially told, because we have to keep on taking advantage of our labor cost, which is likely to be, because in one of the deliberations, the chairman of Team Lease, a good friend of mine, Mr. Manish Agarwal, he says that China's wage structure is increasing and China's brand is a little impaired. So there is likely to be a shift of manufacturing to the likes of Vietnam or India or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka for that. So to that extent, I think the low-cost banking that we are seeing, because the typical senior management pay in India is not even 1/10 of that of developed market, and ditto. I think maybe at the entry level, it will be half of what entry level bankers get there. But the fact remains that the low wage advantage of India has to be leveraged for some time to come. Whether we take banking to the hinterland or whether we roll out new products and services, or we take banking to the urban poor, or we make digitization, or we do direct benefit transfer, or we do algorithmic lending, but collection has to be on the individual level. So if we have to do this, the only way is that the jobs will get shifted. For example, I'll tell you in my own life. When I joined SBI in the early 80s, that time in SBI there was a back office computerization, and in all there were about 150 people who were engaged. And in my own lifetime, we have seen that vendor and our own staff put together, SBI today has about 1/4, if not 1/3, of the total workforce directly or indirectly engaged in technology. In fact, when I was CIO of SBI, I went and met the CIO of HSBC, who also used to sit on their board. As you know, HSBC is very hungry in expanding to various geographies, not on their own, but through their acquisition mode. So they used to take local banks. So he was telling that out of the 273,000 employees, which is almost equivalent to an SBI employee, more than 100,000 are in technology. So I think this shift of bankers will happen towards people who are supporting technology, who are orchestrating technology, who are manufacturing technology, who are working with the vendor ecosystem as service provider. I think that is the via media through which the low-cost wage structure as well as redundancy of the frontline staff both can be put together.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harish, and thanks, Mr. Mahapatra. So when you talk of costs, sir, there could be, two big stress areas, if I say so: loss of revenue and cutting costs. Okay, I think these are the two big stress areas that we could see. What should a leader do to get over these two stresses?
I think the writing is clear on the wall. What we are looking at is probably smaller projects. The time of mega projects, even 5 years back, I would have thought of a multi-100 crore project for a bank in which I worked with 3 or 4 years or abroad. Minimum, even when I was in London, a project used to be 5 or 8 million kind of thing. Now probably smaller projects which are amenable more to agile methods of working will be on the fore. The style, individual style as well as professional style, has to be quick to experiment, quick to fail, and quick to move on. Third thing is that collaboration, what we call again in agile, this thing, that daily huddle, or everybody knowing everything else, the core of transparency. That is how leaders operating out of their closed cabins and amenable to few seniors and only to their secretary or somebody like that, that has to change. Leaders have to have a more open door policy. Book by Amit Lodha, Bihar Diaries. It's a very interesting book on an IPS officer's life in criminal-infested Bihar in the early 90s and 2000. So there he says that unlike in many other jobs which are hierarchy-driven, in police, unless the constable knows that the boss is also able to run with you and fire like you and crawl like you and catch a thief in his own hands, respect will not be there.
Yes.
So I think leaders today have to be worker leaders, if necessary, that they can demonstrate the capability. They cannot say that, I remember again in one of the board meetings that I attended, the IT head was told by one of the board members, the bank depends on you. Well, very well said. There is no doubt that bank depends on IT. But the IT leader will require that, are you familiar with what is an API? Are we familiar with what is a middleware? Are you familiar with what is Agile? Are you familiar with what is CISO roles? Are you familiar with what is application portfolio management? Are you able to guide the front line because you are knowledgeable and you understand the nitty-gritties? Gone are the days when you only announce that technology is important. So leaders have to have deeper knowledge than it was required in the past. Leaders have to have the ability of being hands-on and hands-off, depending on situation. If something is going off the beaten track or off the projected trajectory, then the leaders have to bring in their own resources, like what we saw, that Major Babu getting killed. If necessary, he has to go to the front and engage in fisticuffs if it is required. It's not just leading from the leaders have to be like majors rather than major generals.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. So we take another question directly. Tyag wants to ask a question. Tyag, can you unmute and ask the question, please?
Good afternoon, sir. It's been a very enlightening session and very insightful with so much of knowledge being pouring in. I'm unable to cope up very frankly. Having said that, Mr. Mahapatra, I have a question for you, and I take this cue from no less than a book from Mr. Devdutt Patnaik, The Leadership Sutra, an Indian Approach to Power. It says leaders often equate themselves with lions. I can say this alpha male, or it could be the other female also, and indulge their desire to dominate, when in fact the point of leadership is to be secure enough to outgrow the lion within us and enable and empower those around us. But this is not easy, as anxiety overpowers the best of leaders. Sir, your take on this, and to the viewers and attendees of Future Leaders. Over to you, sir.
No, I think because this is a question based on mythology, let me delve into my knowledge of mythology to answer this question. See, leaders, as Devdutt rightly says, again, I have had extensive discussions with him personally. So, and I have invited him for quite a few talks. What he meant probably is that leaders were lions in the sense that they had muscular power, they had hierarchical power, they had the looks, and probably they had the roar. So that defined the traditional method of leadership. Now, leaders today are driven more by data and analytics. In one of my videos, I have told that what happened to, Lord Rama, for example. Leaders have to be very discerning about the information that they get, the biases of the informers, and taking information based on past use cases. Lord Rama is praised for everything except his treatment of Mother Sita. Because, somebody in the streets was talking about that, Sita is unpure because she spent 14 years in the house of Ravana, and Lord banished it. And he never examined that whether they were literate enough to make this comment, whether they were, they were biased, or whoever is the spy who is giving the information, whether he had a hidden agenda or he was, wanting to tell. So, and same thing happened with Dronacharya also. Dronacharya, why he got killed? Leaders get killed because many times their emotions are exploited by people who are waiting to exploit it. When Yudhishthira was telling that, Ashwatthama is dead, maybe man, maybe elephant. So, and he suppresses the voice while telling maybe man or maybe elephant. So that time the biases are coming to play. The modern leader's life is to get data, analytics, information and advice which are not pure. So simply by roaring or simply by looks or simply by, telling that I am the king, things will not happen. So mythology has also enough number of examples to tell that, yes, what the modern leader has to do, and the modern leader has to be more depending on ability to process information faster, quicker, and in the agile method. That is, whatever are the failure, learning from those failures. I hope, because there are no right answers to this. This is a discussion only.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Tyag, and thank you, Mr. Mahapatra.
Thank you, sir.
So, sir, if you don't mind, can I take another query directly? Mr. Tripathi, editor of ETV Global, would like to ask you a question. Mr. Tripathi, unmute and ask.
Good noon, Mr. Mahapatra.
Hello.
Sir, I have a different question from banking, but I hope you will be able to help me because of your long career in banking and association with importer, exporter, and all kinds of businesses. Sir, there is a lot of discussion about our dependence on China and to boycott China. And you were also at the forefront of implementing IT. A lot of hardware comes from China. What is your sense to what extent we have been dependent and how it could be reduced? And whether you ever, during your time, whether did you ever ask your vendors to look at other sources other than China? How well we are dependent on China and how it could be reduced?
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question. I think all of you may read the book called China by Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger used to be, and long back I read this book, and it is very interesting that political economy will probably dominate diplomacy more than anything else. So what we are seeing today is a power play. In fact, again, those of you who are subscribing to my YouTube channel, I have put a video there that how the banking equations in the world are getting redefined. Banking depends on 3 or 4 major things. The power of big banks, the American banks, the big 4, the Wells Fargo, the Citibank, the JP Morgan Chase, and the Goldman Sachs. All these people, they had the power of equity. They had the power of networking to define which deals will be done through them, in the sense that how much fundraising they can happen, the power of the payment systems, and the power of technology. Now the power play is coming out in the Chinese equation to the world. China, those of you who follow China, as I told you, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is called BRI, is nothing but a power play. The new development bank, which is headquartered in China, as an answer to the World Bank, because World Bank used to interfere and meddle with the economies of the world. with a lot of sanctions, a lot of what you can do, a lot of which projects you can support, which groups, what are the democratic rights and all. They thought that probably this is too much of a hegemony that is happening. So what we are seeing, my own view is that this China, showing once in a while their power thing, this will phase out, and the Chinese equipment today. Why the daughter of the founder of Huawei has been imprisoned in Canada? Why? Because the American preparedness for 5G is much below both the cost and the technology advantage of some of the Chinese companies. So in my mind, this is a political power play which will be played through economic and banking sector. Technology will play its role. The Chinese technology, because the cost advantage, Trump administration brought a regulation that American companies will not sell computer chips to Chinese companies. Now, because in the modern society, the economic consideration outweighs everything else. Most of these American companies established European subsidiaries through which they supplied to China. So people will find out ways in which they will do business if economic consideration is preponderantly high. So my view is that this power play will continue for some time, because America will register that the world currency, which is the dollar, will shift its base out of it, and the power of quantitative easing and printing money to support wars like Vietnam will be taken out and will be given to somebody else. At the same time, China will continue to have its expansion of political clout, whether to begin with in Africa, Maldives or Vietnam or Korea or something. But this is continue to stay. We will have to live with this flux for a while.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Tripathi, for asking this question. So we come, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this session. It's past the more than past the hour since we started this. So we covered a whole lot of topic under the leadership, and I think Mr. Mahapatra has brought out so many things, including references for us to go back and look at some of these books that he's talked about, like Digital Nation by Chandra, book on Bihar, Bank 4.0, websites like Project Syndicate, and World Economic Forum, Fourth Industrial Revolution. So I think he's given us a whole lot of things. He's talked about massive demand for reskilling, deskilling, and upscaling. Leaders must have much more deeper knowledge than what they have, what they are. And banking will be required, but may not be banks. So I would like to thank Mr. Mahapatra. With these words, sir. So leadership will be challenging in such times. For many leaders, one of the hardest things to do is to rely on the opinions and decisions of other people. But that's exactly what they need to do in times of crisis, especially when the cause of the crisis is outside of their area of expertise. So with these words, I conclude today's session of business.
Okay,
and
before
banking.
we depart, I think it's very good to be there. But during this time, in my own life, I've seen that we face smaller crises, but keep your health and humor both intact, because it's very important that you should laugh at yourself, because failures will be too many. And one of the hallmark of leaders, in fact, again, just to tell the obvious, I'm reading one book called Leadership in Turbulent Times. Okay. This is the story of American presidents who have steered America through a lot of difficult times. It says that humor, health, that laughing at yourself, and the ability to not laugh at others, but ability to empathize and understand that with the community health, that your health remains intact. These are the two key things.
Absolutely, sir. Well said, sir. Yeah. I think, thank you very much, Mr. Mahapatra. for your time. We've taken more than what our scheduled time is from you. And sorry about that, but the topic we covered was so good that we had to stretch a little bit. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you again in another edition of the Business and Banking Dialogue. Thank you, participants. Be safe, be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.